PSD EdTech Coaches Podcast number 19. It doesn't have to be I do, we do, you do. Let's look at ways to boost students' productive struggle with our guests, instructional EdTech coaches Melissa Shields and Jerry Sloan.
Welcome to the PSD EdTech Coaches podcast for educators by educators that love to equip teachers, ponder, and discuss current issues and climate in education. With your hosts, Dan Hopman and Steve Stuckey.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. This is Steve Stuckey with my co-host, Dan Hopman.
Happy summer, everybody. I hope you guys are all at home, relaxing, and trying to just sort of get over what craziness we just got out of a couple weeks ago.
Well, it seems like it was just a couple weeks ago. It feels like it could be a lifetime ago, but it also is going by rather quickly. We're now at the end of June, heading into July, which means we're going to start this craziness all over again.
Making sure that we're relaxed now, because I know as we get toward the end of July, we're going to be stressed, just trying to get things, our brains wrapped around whatever is coming our way, because we just don't know yet. And I know that's a lot of the stress.
Well, yeah, I think there is some worrying about next year. I worry about what's going to happen next year. I still have a lot of questions that I haven't even begun to see answers to. Maybe a little brief ones here. And we have nothing really to report as far as what's going on.
Very true. And I know there's been a lot of talk back and forth, different scenarios, different requests by parents on what they want, what teachers want. And I know there's a lot of red tape they have to get through. So I'm hoping that happens soon, because I know teachers, once July hits, they ramp up and it's time to plan and it's time to get their mind wrapped around what August looks like. And I know a lot of teachers want to get that started soon.
Well, here we are in our summer edition of the podcast, and that means we haven't totally shut down. We are thinking about what's coming up in the future, and we want to deliver some of those ideas to you today. And hopefully you stopped and reflected a little bit about what changes you need to make as far as school goes next year, especially in case we end up doing some remote teaching.
And Steve said it a couple times, at least, is prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. And I think that's kind of where we are right now until we find out what next year looks like. I think we kind of need to start preparing for any scenario we might have, classroom scenario, online scenario, or some form of hybrid, whatever that might look like. I don't know.
I don't want to be cynical, but I'm cynical, and I would much prefer just to be able to go back to normal someday soon. Wouldn't that be great?
Well, that'd be awesome. Whatever normal looks like anymore. I think I might have forgotten.
Well, I know we're heading into the new school year rather quickly, unless those things change, of course, unless they push it back. Who knows? If you would like to be part of the show, I'd like you to go to our website at palmdalesd.org/edtech and fill out the form off of the front page there, where you will find information about the podcast. Tell us who you are, what you want to talk about, and share with everybody else. We'd love for you to join us.
We want you guys to drive our podcast. Steve and I, we plan, we come up with ideas, but we really want to hear from you guys. You guys are the ones that we serve. And so we want to make sure that we are covering everything that you might need. One of those needs is a Google update, which I thought over the summer was an awesome Google update. I will say this is mainly for dual immersion, but Google has now added in a Spanish grammar suggestion as you're typing in Google Docs and Gmail. So if you are typing in Spanish, and muy bueno, if you're typing in Spanish and there's some grammar issues in there, it will now catch them in Spanish. The language will automatically be detected by Google, because it's Google. They seem to detect everything, and they'll start providing those grammar suggestions to you. I think that's an awesome update that they could provide, especially for Palmdale, because we do have all those dual immersion classes and schools.
And if you haven't yet, you might want to consider archiving those old Google Classrooms. You can still use assignments from them, archiving your old dojos. your Hapara workspaces, etc. Make sure that's done now, and maybe even start just setting up what you're going to do to get the kids online in case we are a hybrid model, a complete at-home model, or just you have learned that there is a value in not having all that paper flow in a regular classroom using some of those products like Classroom Dojo or Hapara Workspace.
Having those things all ready to go, take one more thing off your plate, and then no matter what next year looks like, you're ready to get started and you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I guess, spend a little bit of time now and a whole lot less worry when it smacks you in the face. So I don't know how else to put it. That's how I feel true. This beginning of the year is going to be. It's going to be a big slap in the face, and we're going to all have to adjust how we do things, even more so than we did when we were slapped in the face this last spring, and it took us all the way to the end of the school year.
You're absolutely right, and I keep quoting what you've been saying, which is prepare for the worst but hope for the best. I think that's just the only way I think we can cope with what's next year.
So one of the things that we probably learned from this last spring was that our old ways of teaching, where we lecture and read, we might give some kind of worksheets or have them do some kind of work, maybe give them a quiz, got them in that game of gotcha, did you study? Did you pay attention? And maybe we need to flip that. And I think that is what we would like to just totally talk about today is it doesn't have to be the old script, I do, we do, you do, but we want to look at how we flip that script and how we boost students' productive struggle. So we're bringing back in from our long quarantine, Melissa Shields and Jerry Sloan. Welcome, guys. Welcome back to the new audio version of the podcast. You have not been on the audio version yet, have you?
We have not.
Nope, not yet.
So what have you guys
Today is it.
What have you guys been doing this summer? Worrying, reflecting, forgetting?
I've been reading. I'm so excited. I got a couple of new books, educational books on leadership, and I've got a new one coming on relationships in education. So I'm pretty excited about that.
And besides cleaning out everything, I've got plenty of that to do. I've been enjoying reading lots of articles about education and also about the news and science, and trying to learn a lot about what's going on in our world today. And I think that's really been helping.
So nobody's stir crazy then?
No,
I'm stir crazy. I
miss three-dimensional people, I have to say. I like, when they're like round and,
It's actually funny you say that, because the San Francisco Giants, now that baseball is coming out, are actually going to put in cardboard people into the stands for the baseball games. So yes, I miss three-dimensional people. I completely understand, and I agree.
How many homeless could you feed for the cost of putting fake people in a stadium for a baseball game? I'm not just a thought.
Yeah, that's a very good thought. Yeah,
this can go off the rails real quick, couldn't it? Huh? So I did mention that we want to really focus in on boosting students' productive struggle and ways to do that. And why would we want to do that? So, and I think it starts from throwing away our old ways of teaching, the I do, we do, you do, into different manners. What are your thoughts on that, people?
Well, the old ways are boring. They were boring. We always knew that we had to sit and listen to them anyway, right? Maybe we didn't even realize how boring they were. And I shouldn't say that, because that's not always true, but we were told, sit down, get an education, do what you're told, and spit it out. And we can see in every aspect of today's world that that's not how it works. You've got to contemplate what you're doing. You've got to process it and analyze it with a new lens. I mean, every kid and every adult today is being asked to do that.
When it's the I do, and I'm up in front, kids expect you just to spew out how to do it and give them the answers, and it's sort of like giving them a spoon feeding them, isn't it? Whereas
it's that old,
we need to
sage on the stage thing.
We need to develop ways that they can actually do the thinking on their own?
There's a difference between I do in a modeling and then I do as in let me walk you through the entire lesson and all the steps. And I think that students, the way that I learn now as an adult is it's a little bit different. I won't say a lot different. It's a little bit different than the way I learned as a student. But I'm thinking about when I go to PDs now, or I'm trying to learn how to use a new tool. I do want to know the rules. I do want to know where to find things, and I want clear expectations set so that I know where to go. But I also don't want to be talked to for 45 minutes, and students don't want to be talked to for 45 minutes. You'll lose them within the first 3 or 4. So we need to switch
That was generous saying 3 or 4, by the way.
Huh?
That was generous saying 3 or 4 minutes. Yeah.
They'll hang on for 3 or 4 minutes. They'll hang on to me for 3 or 4 minutes because I'm worth watching. I'm just going to say. But no, I mean, I noticed I was talking to my niece the other day, and she was talking about classes she was taking in high school. She just graduated recently. And she was saying that her most favorite teacher, her most favorite class was this teacher who gave her like tons of work. But the teacher started off with very clear expectations. This is what I want. And it didn't matter whether, even if there was a bit of a lecture or a group activity or whatever, she was super happy because she knew what was expected of her, but then she was given freedom to collaborate with her teammates and work in the classroom and do her own creative thing and then go to the teacher. She just needed those clear expectations in the beginning, not to be talked at. And she would complain how her other teachers would talk for 45 minutes and then say, okay, go do.
I'm glad you pointed that out, Melissa. And here's a new way of looking at it. So it still has the teacher not talking as much, like the old school. But I like what Steve said, and flipping the script, you do, we do, I do. So, I mean, it changes it up. For number one, try it first independently. Let the students struggle with it first. Let them see what already they have in their mind, what kind of prior knowledge they have, what kind of strategies they can get together, and then compare it with their partners. And that might be look a little different on remote learning, but let them see what the other students did and then give them the model.
Well, another way of looking at that, Jerry, when we flip the script, and I think we covered this, I don't remember how many podcasts ago, instead of saying, you do, we call it explore. And this ties into what Melissa has said too. You have to give them some very explicit directions on what you're looking for, but have them gather the background knowledge on the topic first on their own. You can provide the articles, the videos, the pictures, and so on, and then then go and then you explain. Here's where you come in. You get to fill in the gaps that you see that they didn't get when they were exploring. But now they have the buy-in into the topic because they're the ones exploring. They weren't just being spoken to. And then instead of giving them a quiz and saying, I gotcha, have them apply it some way. Create something to show that they know what you're doing instead of just answering questions.
So let me also...
And perhaps,
Go ahead, Jerry.
No, perhaps something they would care about too, not just some random product that it doesn't have meaning for them. Go ahead, Dan.
No, and so what I'm going to say is that, and I know there's a lot of teachers out there who have been doing I do, you, or I do, we do, you do for decades. And when it's done efficiently, it's done really well, and the data will show that it works. But what happens is that the teachers get stuck in the I do, we do way too long. Flipping that script allows more to the students and less time on us being the stars of the show.
What did Alice Keeler say a couple years ago at our summit? The ones doing the learning should be doing the working. And I think teachers are working too hard. So teachers need to really then find a way to push that productive struggle onto the kids. Now, by definition, on this productive struggle is where you have kids put more effort into the learning, and so that they develop that persistence or that learning or the grit and problem solving ahead of everything else. Because if we can do that, we don't have to spend so much time on I do, and then let's all do it together.
And if they're doing a lot of the learning, if they're doing the troubleshooting and they're doing the investigating, they have something invested in it now. It's not just we're born by nature curious. We want to learn things. We want to. I mean, when my son was 18 months old, his like only word was that. He wanted to know what's that. So if you give students who are maybe a little bit more challenged in their learning, or they have some maybe learning disabilities or struggling, you don't just give them easy stuff to do just so that you keep them busy, because then they won't be interested in. So if we give them something to struggle with, or something that's just a little bit more challenging, and they start solving it on their own. I mean, how much more exciting is it if someone says, okay, the answer's 5. Okay, 5. I don't care. But if, I figure out and I go, oh, I think the answer's 5 and I'm so excited, then I've got something invested in it. And I went, okay, now what's next? Give me something else.
Well, and if you think about the I do, we do, you do, when students get to the you do and they struggle, there's a drop in their confidence because they feel like they've missed something ahead of them, something that's already been done. Flipping that script, they miss something, and now they get to go find out what it is they can use to solve it. Now they kind of become a detective instead of trying to be a problem solver. And I know it seems kind of weird. We want our kids to be problem solvers. But when I say problem solver, in this case, I'm talking about, all right, you've been given the steps on how to do this problem. What step did you miss? And now you have to go back and try to figure that out. Flipping that script, the students can make that guess, like Melissa's saying, the answer's 5. Okay, now how did I get there? What steps did I take? They're the ones writing that script, not the teacher. And I think changing that point of view is huge.
So with the I do, we do, you do, most of the time, then it's teacher talk time. And what you're saying, Dan, brings up this idea of dialogic teaching, where talk becomes the effective tool for carrying out that learning. And so when the kid gives an answer or a guess like 5, the conversation needs to happen in order for them to develop those thought processes, the persistence, the idea that I need to understand and know and stick to it as they work through those problems.
And there's different ways to solve those problems too. It's not just okay, here are the steps. Let's go ahead. I know I've done these steps before. Let me go back and revisit them. It's giving them something like a brand new problem and saying, hey, I know you're going to struggle with this. I understand you don't know the answer. I understand you don't know how to do it. But it's up to you to try to figure that out. And I'm here to be the support.
And I like when you've done, when a student says, okay, here's the teacher's explained it. And then how does that compare to what you did originally? What did you do right? What did you do wrong? What would you change? How could we look at it differently? So that almost metacognition, I love that word, but how do I think and how do I analyze? And all a teacher needs to say in some of this stuff is, tell me how you know that. How did you figure that out? What did you do?
Which is a level higher level question. How do you know you know that? Rather than giving me a fact.
Well, and I know a lot of the teachers are going to say, well, how do I do that in all subjects? In language arts, it's so hard to give because there really isn't a formula for them to follow, but you can give them different points of view. Maybe they answer questions from a character's point of view, or they retell the story in a different character point of view. Stuff like that. It's just getting the kids doing something different than just following step 1, step 2, step 3.
Science.
And it's interesting you say, yeah, it's science, right? It's interesting you said that, Dan, and Steve points it out too, because science and language arts both have the how do you know that? Well, that's essential to Common Core and NGSS.
And with science, to build on that, you can throw out some data and then have them make some predictions based upon the data. And now they're doing some higher level thinking. Or even just giving
them a set of information and asking them to sort them. Group 1 may give you one answer. Group 2 may give you separate answer as they're sorting all this information. And no one's saying that it's all right or it's all wrong. It's all about their perspective and it's on their point of view of their learning.
A lot of people think sorting's just for small kids, but I remember doing at least with 5th grade and sometimes above, bringing in baggies of nuts, bolts, washers, and putting it in front of them and asking them to sort them based upon their characteristics. And it wasn't as easy for them as you think. And they had to then justify their reasons why they put them in the groups they did. And not every group had the same answers, which was fine.
And justification, that's a good point. That goes into everything. Prove it. How do you know? Why do you know that? And justify your answer. And now you've got critical thinking imbued in whatever you're doing.
Social studies, primary sources. You can put out some old photographs, old pictures from scenes from history and have them look at it. Think about what they notice in the picture and what they think it means. Because a lot of times, you know, the artist's or the photographer's intention wasn't what you think it means. They had a different idea behind it. And it doesn't just mean pictures. You can have primary sources that are video clips, audio, music, poetry, you name it.
Except for some math questions, how many things in life are either yes or no, right or wrong? Like there's only one concrete answer. Not a lot, maybe. Sorry, Melissa.
One thing that we haven't even addressed, which I guess I'm always thinking about this, is on the teacher end, you know, what kind of work does this require for me as a teacher? And while it's definitely more helpful to have other teachers to collaborate with, like you mentioned earlier about the ones doing the learning or doing all the work, it's a lot less work on the teacher and a lot less stress. Because if I'm working so hard and I spend hours creating a worksheet and graphic organizers, and my plan is to get kids to do this and to fill in these boxes this way, and then later on, the lesson doesn't turn out like I want because they weren't following my directions by my step by step because I did, and I showed them how. Or maybe now the kids are cheating. How can I stop them from cheating? Well, you need to, if you're investing so much time and so much work, now I'm all frustrated because I'm not getting things done. I'm not getting the right answers because, like Jerry, you mentioned the right and the wrong answer, and I've got to fill in these boxes. There's not a lot of learning going on. My stress level as a teacher is going up because I'm not getting the answers that are filled in the box like I think they should. I'm worried about the kids cheating. Of course, they're going to cheat because they're bored because it's a worksheet. So, you know, if you give them something creative, I can watch them learn. I can answer their relevant questions instead of just giving them answers to questions they never had because they didn't care. And so anyways, I was just getting all excited because I think about how frustrated teachers get.
Well, you know, I would say that I've been guilty of it in the past too, is where we put in some notes and I go, kids, I want you to copy my notes. You know, we may be going through it and I go, I want it in this format. They need to be in this format. We're all going to have the same notes. Rather than saying, kids, let me show you how to do 2-column notes. Let's use an Avid strategy, 3-column notes. Teach them on something that is cognitively not straining on them. But then when it's time, you have them make their notes. You don't sit there and have to spoon feed it and go step by step by step by step. Work the room. Let them struggle with it. Let them dissect the information, say if it's from the textbook or not. So you have time to work with the kids, check on them while they're doing it, rather than being up there on the stage and say, all right, kids, make sure you're copying down these notes correctly. I've seen it. I admit that I've done it.
And, you know, I think, Melissa, there's 4 things I can think of that would help a teacher with that. Number 1, they've got to be planned. And when I say planned, it doesn't mean that they've done what you said, filling out, creating the worksheets, writing out the notes. I'm going to have them up on the smart board and they're going to copy everything I do, or on the Promethean, everything I do. The second thing is that they need to know the material. A lot of times I think the teachers, and no fault, I know they have a lot of stuff on their plate. They walk in that day thinking, all right, what am I teaching today? Oh, okay, we're teaching on this, this, and this. I can do that. I don't need to really plan all that much on it. Third thing is releasing it to their students. The students have got to be able to be independent with structure. And then the last thing is knowing what you want your students to know at the very end, which kind of goes back to number 1 and 2, planning and knowing your material. It doesn't all have to look at the exactly the same at the very end. Every student can do something different, but hopefully the information is pretty identical once they're all done.
I think
if they do those 4 things, that'd be important.
I think one of the keys there is the idea of this: teachers need to release it to the students. I know we all want our students to be highly successful, and we feel if we're not totally on top of it and they're doing what we're doing, they're not going to be successful. Well, if they're doing what we're doing, they're not doing. They're copying. And they're not learning when they're copying. They learn when they do. So you're right. You have to release it to the kids.
It's
Some
their
great
knowledge.
points. Some great points you guys made. And I love the way Melissa described the struggle the teachers have. And I noticed that when I would step back and just ask questions and just look at what students were doing, I felt so refreshed, so excited, and so loving teaching on those days when I gave them a project and I just walked around and I asked them those questions. And we
learn a lot from them too in asking those questions. You know, sometimes you think we have our own ways that we've learned things over the years, and we think, oh yeah, this is the way to do something. And then a kid comes up and says, hey, you know, let's say you're, like you mentioned, you're asking questions and you're saying, well, how did you get there? What did you do this? And then they show you something and you go, that's cool. I never knew you could do it that way. Hey guys, did you see what so-and-so did? Look how they did it. How else have you do it this way? And then you learn something new about your students, about the way they learn, you know?
And you learn on your own too, because we all know that we aren't the experts at all. And there's so much that we can learn.
Let's talk about some ways then that teachers can have. What are some habits teachers who value productive struggle can use and do in their classroom?
Well, I think, a lot of the teachers don't want to give up the idea of the textbook. I think a lot of times they can still use that as a tool. I know in the research, knowing what we were going to talk about, one of the things that they can do is ask the question at the end of the chapter before you start the chapter. So if you're going to be tied to the textbook, that's fine, but give them what they're supposed to know at the very beginning with that question that like Jerry was saying, that guiding coalition question of what we're going to learn today. That
essential
needs to
question.
be the very beginning, the essential question.
Right, Dan? Yeah, that's in our books even. You don't even have to come up with your own, although you might want to tweak it to have meaning for you and what you want your students to accomplish.
Absolutely. But, if you're going to use the textbook, that's fine. Use it, but use it productively. Don't just, all right, guys, chapter 1, page 3, let's go. Let's start reading.
And none of these textbooks are going to cover really what we ultimately want our students to do in those ways, like critically thinking or perseverance, or even, the things that we've been talking about. And we can't cover page by page. So you look at your list, your textbook, you think, oh, we missed chapter 2, let's say social studies. Do we need that? Is that really part of the framework and the standards that we're being asked to teach the students or to have them explore? And how essential is it? So yeah, textbooks can be misguiding sometimes, I think.
So maybe one of the old habits that a teacher might have is that they end up calling on students they feel know the answer, because they don't want the wrong answers floating around the room. They only want the right answers. And then the same 4 kids always raise their hands, and so you're focusing a lot on that. I think one of the habits to produce that productive struggle with the kids is that you need to call on those who may not have the correct answer. And then you can have ways, because they're not going to be the only one in the classroom. But when you call on people with the wrong answers, then you can guide them in a process of questioning and thinking to arrive to a correct understanding. I think that is one great habit change that a teacher can make.
Yeah, and you mentioned about the students who may not always know the answer. And because, like you said, there's always more than one. If one kid doesn't know, chances are there's like 7 who don't know. And but there's a mind shift for the teachers, because we want to tend to say, good job, you did a great job. Oh, I'm proud of you. You got the right answer. And sometimes it's really, well, not sometimes, it's not necessarily about the right answer, but are they developing that perseverance, like Jerry mentioned, and are they struggling through it? So instead of, it's that Carol Dweck mentioned the growth mindset, in that saying that instead of saying, hey, good job, you got the right answer, it's like, can you show me how you struggled through that so that you could, what steps did you take? Or instead of, I like the way you turned this in on time, it's like, so, I appreciate that you kept trying and that you didn't give up. That's going to serve you well in the future. Or, oh, I see that you didn't just use, your pencil and write down the number problems. You also drew pictures. And I saw that you were talking with your neighbor, and that helped you to come, or ask them, how did talking with your neighbor help you to come to a better solution? And just kind of that process. If you get a chance to see that Carol Dweck video on the growth mindset, it's really amazing. And the results that came from students who were told, good job, and how they gave up. They didn't develop that perseverance when they were faced with a challenge. But students who were told, this is a great problem solving strategy, what else can you do? Those students were more likely to persevere and succeed because they just didn't give up.
That's because it's hard work doing hard work. And you're more motivated to do hard work when people are appreciating that.
But if students are engaged in that, the hard work is appreciated, and time again does fly when you are involved in it. Listening to the teacher talk all day long and taking notes, what the teacher writes up there, or copying their paragraph, whatever it is boring, and the day goes on and on and on.
And it's not hard work. It's just tedious work.
Right.
Well, yeah, that's definitely right. Because when it's tedious, you're bored, and it does seem like the day drags on forever. But when you're involved in it and you're using the brain power and thinking about what you're thinking, time flies.
And I'm going to point out the behavior issues too. Sometimes you've got those kids who are so low, or they're special ed kids, or they're messing around. And what if you ask them to unpack their thinking about something, and then ask the other students, if that's possible, well, has anyone else thought that way? Or what are some things that you liked about what that student said? So even though you're not getting a right answer because the kid's going to be way off, you're still kind of honoring their thinking and letting kind of a crowdsource, but does anyone else thought of that? Or what else could that person think? And so you're not like a bad guy in the room. It's everyone supporting that struggling student. And now they're feeling a little more proud, a little more involved in that classroom.
Well, so one of the things then with a struggling student is you don't give them easier work, because then they get the message that they can't handle challenging work. And you need them to understand that, yes, you can handle it, and it takes a little bit more effort and a little bit more work, but you can get yourself to that next level without it being dumbed down.
And what helps with that too is just being able to give them the guidance and the accurate feedback that helps them to know what to do. If you see a student struggling and you go, oh, I'd give that a C. Okay, my work is done. The kid's not going to, but if you say, oh, and you give them very specific feedback that helps them know how they can correct it. I used to love when kids would come up and say, they'd show me the work. Am I done? And I look at it, I go, I don't know. Are you? And then they're like, and then they look at me, and then they start thinking back to the expectations I gave them. Okay, these are the expectations I gave you. Do you feel that you've met that? And if you don't feel that you've met that, do you need help? And how can I help you? And if I take a look at it, I can give them specific, because I've had teachers ask me about, oh, well, but I have to give them a grade. And I'm like, why do you have to give them a grade? Is the goal to get an A, or is the goal to develop a skill or master something? If the goal is to master something, then let's give some specific feedback to guide them to that goal.
I like your junior high perspective, where the kid is actually nice enough to sit there and say, am I done? I know in elementary, I'm done. After 2 minutes, I'm done. And maybe it just wasn't rigorous enough. I don't know. But
they may say that too. I'm done. Then I go, are you?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Oh, the other question.
I always got that.
The other question the little kids come up with all the time is this okay?
Is this okay? I don't know. Do you think it's okay?
I don't know. Is it?
And so,
yeah, exactly.
Then it becomes an adult problem of whether or not I gave good enough expectations for the kid to be able to follow. And then follow that up with, like you're saying, Melissa, with a question. Does it meet the criteria? Does it meet the expectations? Do you understand it? Can they apply it?
I like what you said, Steve, too. I mean, don't give people easier work. Just say, okay, here's this one problem, or here's this one question about the literature. I want to see all you're thinking about this. I want you to go into great depth and do a great job on this one problem.
Well, I think giving that informative feedback, like Jerry just said, I think is really important too, to help guide them. And again, it's about guiding them. It's not about giving the answer. We want to guide them to success.
Some of my favorite problems are ones where I don't ever give the answer to. Now, sometimes I can do some creative problem-solving, critical thinking games with kids, and a couple kids will get it, and that's great. But then they have to, swear an oath of not telling anybody the answer ever, because it would ruin it for the whole class. And they're pretty good about that because they like being in the club where they know they figured it out along with the teacher, as I've been teasing them.
Yeah, they like those. Dan, you were doing some red herrings, some YouTube red herrings over the summer, and I used to do those on Fundamental Fridays with my avid students and then with all my classes because they really liked it so much where they had to try to, I gave them basic one-line information that told nothing and they had to solve some kind of problem and they had to ask me all kinds of questions and they loved that.
Well, yeah, we when all this started, I had gone online and I had, for some of my friends' kids who, the parents didn't know what to do with them. And so we did something I used to do in the classroom at the end of every day, which was stories with holes. And they had to come up with the missing information. It could be something that has to do with what a character might have thought or did, I got more participation at the end of my school day by just giving the answers of yes and no with no other information than I did throughout the day when I needed concrete answers. The kids loved that struggle. And I could probably hold their attention longer doing that than I could with anything else.
And what a great way for them to leave at the end of the day feeling like excited and creative and curious, as opposed to, oh, thank God it's over.
What's funny is you trick them into becoming problem solvers and critical thinkers because there's not a grade tied to it. It's cognitively interesting to them. And so by providing those non-routine problems that they don't have to have memorized or from a lesson of step-by-step on how to do something, it challenges them. And you ask them to try to make sense of what they're thinking, really promotes this idea of productive struggle.
Well, on top of that too, sorry, Jerry, on top of that too, I always gave them time to come up with their questions and to really think about the answers that were given, even if it was just yes or no. What makes my question a yes? What makes my question a no? And, we talk about Steve putting the kids in the club. The kids would go home and they would, talk to their parents about it. First thing in the morning, Mr. Hubman, I have an answer for you. All right, well, come here, whisper in my ear. Don't tell anybody. Wait until the end of the day. And so now they're in it and they're engaged. And that's the bottom line, is that we want them engaged.
Well, I see a theme here with all of you guys have some wonderful ideas, and it all just sounds like making a game out of school, like gamification. And who doesn't get involved in a game of some sort and get lost in it? So I love those ideas that all of you guys have.
That could be a whole other podcast on gamifying what goes on in the classroom. But, the idea, if you want them to struggle with something productively, you need to engage them somehow. And I think some of those things that we've talked about, praising them for their perseverance in problem solving. What else did we say? Give them non-routine problems at the end of the day or throughout the day where they don't have to memorize something. Give them great feedback. Don't give easier work just to the struggle because they're struggling. Keep on challenging them and give them the message that they can do challenging work.
Valuing the process and not the product.
Exactly. I think that's huge. But then teachers will say, I don't have time. But in order to develop students who can do things on their own, you have to give them some time to ask questions, to think about their ideas. So you might have to slow down the process a little bit, because when you slow it down, it optimizes retention. I mean, I've been in PDs before where they go so fast that yesterday was one. It went so fast that I was busy trying to look at one thing and it's passed me by 5 other times. Slowing it down, I'll retain it better. So will your students.
Slowing things down and allowing processing, it retains learning. And it makes it more concrete and more lasting. And that's just neuroscience right there. Good job, Steve.
So we talk a lot about growth mindset. Melissa brought it up with Carol Dweck's groundbreaking book on having growth mindset. And we all can give it lip service, but whether or not we allow these opportunities for kids to have that growth mindset, we need to make sure that we understand that everyone can solve problems and be problem solvers, and we need to change old habits, bring them in with some new ones. It might change the I do, we do, you do, to explore and then explain and apply, ask questions.
I'm going to have to interrupt you because I'm about to lose this thought, and
Okay.
I don't want to lose it again. In having when we talked about the point about calling on students who we know probably don't have the answer, but guiding them through the struggle. One benefit of that too is that once kids see that the value is not in having the correct answer, but in trying and processing and trying to problem solve, you will have a lot more students feeling safe to be able to take those risks, and you'll increase your participation. I noticed this with my students. The more they realize, when they said, well, I was going to answer, but I was afraid to give the wrong answer. And I said, oh, but guess what? This is science. Do you know how many wrong answers science has been built upon? There's so many wrong answers. That's why we keep struggling. We keep learning. And it became a safe place for students to take that risk and throw out a wrong answer. And then instead of going, no, that's wrong, it's, well, that's interesting. Now, how did you get there? Is there, and then, soliciting from the class, well, do we see if there was a step missed or whatever? And instead of attacking the student or their ability to problem solve, we looked at the actual problem and how it was being solved and kind of crowdsourced different ways around it. And it became a safe place. So more kids felt willing to I know I've said that 3 times.
Yeah,
they're more willing to take the risk.
You're right. They're
so.
self-conscious about being in front of their peers and being wrong. But it reminds me of Thomas Edison, right? His teachers who said that he was too stupid to learn anything. He was fired from his first 2 jobs because he was non-productive. And then as an inventor, he tried unsuccessfully, 1,000 times?
10,000 times.
10,000, 1,000, whatever it was,
that's the quote,
before inventing the light bulb. So I think
he learned 10,000 ways not to do it.
He had a growth mindset, and he didn't shut down because something was hard or difficult.
And they're going to be even in greater deal as we continue teaching. And that just sounds like a great relationship builder. So I love those thoughts very much.
So thinking culture needs to be changed, starting with us and in the classroom and the way we do things. I mentioned at the beginning of the show, have you reflected on changes you might need to make, especially based upon how it went remotely? But it can apply also to how it goes in your classroom. And then when we start making small changes in our habits, those small changes become great changes in what our students are able to do. And that way we can let the students start doing the heavy lifting, let them have struggle that is productive and gets things done for them. We've already been there. We don't need to be up on this and have them become mini me's. They need to become mini thems.
Just in case anybody's wondering, the Stories with Holes, the author is Nathan Levy. He's got like 25 volumes of these stories. And then another one that I forgot I used to do as well, and this goes to actually a PSD teacher, Melanie Montgomery, put together mystery numbers, and they can do that for primary or upper grades. And that's another great way to get kids thinking.
And then, of course, any kind of science inquiry that you do where you have to get them to think and ponder and ask questions to gather data and then give some theories about it, but not giving away the answer, which is a great thing. So, if anybody's listening in our district and you want a couple of these little problem-solving tricks and games, one of them can last you quite a while to keep kids thinking, especially when you do it periodically and not all the time. So I think that
Very
about
true.
wraps it up, guys. Melissa and Jerry, it's great having you guys back almost around the table. I think when we actually can sit in the same room again, podcasts would go much smoother where we can all see each other's faces much more clearly about what we're doing. So it was good hearing your thoughts again. I love sitting around the pseudo campfire, so to speak, and ponder these big ideas. And hopefully listeners out there have paid attention to the end and are pondering themselves, starting to have some productive struggle with their own teaching practices.
I love that.
So
Teachers
Dan,
having productive struggle.
yeah. So Dan, we all have to have it, right? So Dan, any final questions, and we'll bring it out.
No, I'm good. Ladies, anything else you want to add to the end of our day?
Just said how pleased and proud we are to have all the teachers in Palmdale School District. I think we're really impressed, especially when we went out to national discussions and heard how terribly teachers were handling, the lockdown in other parts of the nation. And I just thought, no, I tell people who ask me, and our teachers are doing great. So I know they didn't always think that, but they really did. And I'm still so pleased and proud.
Okay, well, guys, I hope you are having the rest of a great summer. Take care. Keep those social distancing rules and wear a mask. That's something new. Don't touch your face and wash your hands.